When you invite people to your wedding, you have to find out if they're coming or not. And in order to get the right information back from your guests, you have to ask the right questions. So in today's video, I'm talking all about the wedding RSVP, what information you need to collect, why, and when. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Hitched Academy. My name is Kimberly Rhodes. I'm a professional wedding planner and the owner of Hitched Events. If you do not yet follow us on Instagram, you totally should, because there's some beautiful pictures of beautiful events. And while you're there, check out the Hitched Academy Instagram account as well. That's where I share some quotes from previous videos and let you know when new videos are released. So we'd love a follow on both of those accounts. I'm currently in the middle of collecting RSVPs for a client's wedding, and it made me start thinking I should totally do a video about this. So here we are. But as I started thinking about it, there's so much that go into collecting responses for your wedding. I can break it up into multiple videos. So this week, we are just talking about the basics of the response card, what information you need to put on it and why, so that you're getting the information back that you need. So make sure before you mail those invitations, you're thinking through the results of what you need on the back end. Otherwise, you could miss some critical information. Just for full disclosure, I am talking about a response card that is an enclosure to the wedding invitation that is mailed back to you to tell you who is coming to the wedding or not. So most of my clients, in fact, I would say all of my clients are having traditional or formal weddings where a mailed invitation is the way to go. If you are having a more casual wedding, there are other ways to collect RSVPs. I know some people do them online, but we're gonna be talking about a formal mailed invitation with a formal mailed back response card. To go back to the very beginning, RSVP is an acronym for a French phrase. I'm gonna try to say it, I'm probably gonna butcher it, but it is répondez s'il vous plaît. I got the s'il vous plaît right for sure, but répondez s'il vous plaît, which literally in French means please respond. So RSVP is the acronym for that French phrase, please respond. That means you don't have to say please RSVP, because RSVP in and of itself already says please. So if you say please RSVP, you're saying please respond, please, or please respond. Here's a fun fact. It used to be back in the day, I don't know when, like a long time ago, wedding invitations would just say RSVP small in the corner, and there was no enclosure card. So guests were supposed to handwrite a response on their own stationery and mail it back to the host to let them know if they were coming to the event or not. That is the super old school way of doing it. Since then, we've gotten savvy and made it easier for our guests and have included an enclosure card. So that is what we are discussing today, the enclosure card. And there are several things that need to go on the enclosure card first. And what is typically at the top is RSVP. You don't have to say RSVP if you do not want to. You can use kindly reply, or a favor of a reply is requested. It can be worded any way that you want, but it needs to indicate what the guest is supposed to do, that you want them to send that card back. The next element is the deadline for them to do so. So traditionally, if you were to look it up in an etiquette book, Emily Post would say wedding invitations should be mailed 6 weeks to 8 weeks prior to the wedding. Now, I prefer to mail them 8 weeks or even 9 weeks before the wedding, just because the post office can be a little bit slow. But mailing at that 8-week or 9-week mark, we typically would put the RSVP deadline as a month after that. So mailing 2 months before the wedding, and then asking guests to respond a month before the wedding. I like this timing because it gives the guest about 3 or 4 weeks for them to make a decision. And then on the back end, it gives us about 3 or 4 weeks to wrangle the missing RSVPs. So on your response card, it's important to put a deadline and a date for guests to respond by. And I think that 4-week mark is better than later. Just know there are going to be guests you're going to have to track down, you're going to have to follow up with, and giving that time on your end to do so is going to be really important. The next element that you need on your response card is a place for people to write their names. So most traditionally, kind of the old school way of doing it, is a capital M followed by a line. And guests would fill in the rest of that line with the rest of their formal title. So Mr. would be the start of the M, or Mrs., or Mr. and Mrs., or Miss. The M indicates the start of their formal title, and then they would fill in their names on the rest of the line. I will say not everybody gets it, and there will be some guests who just skip the M altogether, but most will figure out that that line is where their names will go. So you need some sort of indication of here's where you put your names. If you did not want to use the formal M or the capital M, you could also write name or names with the S in parentheses, since it could be one person or multiple people, but there just needs to be some indication of here is where you write your name. The next element of the response card is going to be a choice. Are they coming or are they not? This is usually a place for a check mark or an X, either an accepts with pleasure or declines with regret. That would be the most formal way of doing that. You could also have like, hip hip hooray, we're coming, and boo, bummer, I'm sorry not to make it. That wording can be whatever you want, but it needs to be a positive, yes, I'm coming, or a negative, no, I'm not coming. I will say though, that language should coordinate with the formality of your wedding. So if you're having a very formal black tie wedding, you wouldn't say hip hip hooray on your response card. And conversely, if your wedding is super casual, you might not want to say accepts with pleasure and declines with regret, because that is a very formal way of wording it. Regardless of what you choose, you need two options, yes or no, where guests can fill it in. The next thing I'm gonna recommend on your response card is something that you don't always see, but it's something I highly, highly recommend. So if you are doing your invitations online with a company like Minted, say, or if you're going to an invitation company where you're looking through an album, some of those samples won't have this line on it, but it can easily be added. And what my recommendation is that you add a line that says total number attending with a blank. And let me tell you why. A lot of guests don't know how to fill out the response card. And when you get them back in the mail, you have to make a decision on if they filled it out how you think they should have filled it out. So let me give you an example. John Smith. If John Smith was invited with a guest, his envelope would have said Mr. John Smith and guest. When he mails his RSVP card back, what he should do is write Mr. John Smith and Miss Jane Doe, if that is his guest's name. That's what he should do. What John Smith might do is write Mr. John Smith, check that he's coming, and mail it in. And when you get the card, you have to look at it and say, is John Smith really not bringing a guest? Or does John Smith not know how to fill out the card? If you have the total number attending line, Mr. John Smith would have to indicate 2 if he's bringing a guest, or just 1 if he's coming solo. So really, to me, that secondary total number attending line really helps, so you don't have to make assumptions about the guest's ability to fill out the card or assumptions on if they're bringing that second person or not. Also, that total number attending line gives you early indications if someone is bringing an uninvited guest. So let's pretend that you invite a couple, Mr. and Mrs. John Smith, and they write on their card 3. But they were only invited as 2. You at least have the information and can address it, and that's a whole nother video. I will talk about that soon. But without that, they might write Mr. and Mrs. John Smith. They are bringing their kid, but didn't tell you they're bringing their kid, and then you have surprises. So to me, that total number attending blank section of the RSVP card helps you prevent any unexpected guests and lets you know ahead of time if people are thinking they're bringing someone that wasn't really invited. Now, if you are having a buffet or food stations for your event, or you're having a plated dinner and everyone's having the same meal, that's all you really need on your RSVP card. We've covered it all. However, if you are having a plated meal and guests have a choice of entree, then you do need to add a meal selection component to your RSVP card. So if guests are having to pre-select beef or fish or chicken or vegetarian in advance, then your response card needs to indicate that. And if you're going to assign seating, meaning you're choosing every chair that every guest is going to sit at, I highly recommend that the language on the response card indicates that guests should initial their entree choice. So if there's Mr. and Mrs. John Smith on one response card and one is having beef and one is having fish, you don't want them to just check beef and fish. You want to know John is having beef and Jane is having fish. So we use language for our clients in those situations where guests are actually putting their initials by each of the meals so you know who is getting what. I know that seems like a lot, but if you collect all the information up front and have it on your response card how you need it back, you're not gonna have to track down guests last minute and say, oh, I forgot to ask you if you wanted beef or fish. Like, you don't wanna do that. So putting it all up front on the response card makes it so once you get it back in the mail, you have all the information that you could need. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are released, because next week I have another video about RSVPs, more specifically some of my secret tips for how to make the process even easier. Thanks so much, and I will see you soon.